and he calls for them to break swept channel and follow me. They exit the swept channel down there. They sail toward Port-en-Bessin, which is, you can't really make it out right now, but it's the little town just over there. And the Frankfurt in the lead comes, plows toward Port-en-Bessin, and then makes a hard starboard turn to run broadside down the length of Omaha Beach, going from east to west. In fact, when Frankfurt begins the process of moving toward the beach, one of the men on the beach said that he looked out and he saw it and he thought that the ship had been hit and that it was trying to get into shallow water to beach itself, because she came in at full steam, and a Fletcher-class destroyer at full steam can really move out almost 30 knots.
Yeah.
And so here comes Frankfurt.
What kind of draw is the destroyer?
16 feet.
16 feet.
So,
He did risk beaching himself.
yes. And the point is that the McCormick did beach herself at one point during this phase. But Frankfurt comes in first, finally turns broadside to the beach. It's estimated that it was 600 to 700 yards off the beach. So, what is that? That's not even a half mile off the beach. Turns and begins the process of sailing down. I mean, if you consider that the tide was far more in at that point than it is right now. That's the ship that's from the current water line. I think it'd be only 200 or 300 yards from the current water line to where these ships were. And they came in, and that is extraordinarily close. And they begin the process of sailing from the east to the west down the length of the beach with guns turned out broadside, blasting everything along the bluff in here. And as they blast, they pick a target, they deliver fire to it, they keep moving on, they pick another target, and they deliver fire. It's a significant moment at the WN-62 bunker complex, which is now just off of the cemetery, which is where Franz Gockel is with his men. He's in the farthest forward machine gun position. Gockel's firing, and he remembers the point when the ships finally came in close and blasted all the way up the bluff, because his complex went all the way up the bluff to the top.
I remember reading about what he said about the sound.
Right. Concussion sound, that's when he gets injured, that's when he's wounded. He evacuates to the rear. They sail down the length of the beach and they deliver fire against obvious targets, like the WN-62 complex. You can actually see it. You can make it out from offshore. But there are other targets where the ships can't necessarily see what they're shooting at. And so there are moments where, in fact, there's one ship, I believe it was the McCormick, where the gunnery officer on board the ship looks up and sees two riflemen at the shingle line, and they're firing their rifles towards something, and he can see both men are firing. He's looking through his binoculars, and he can see that they're firing at this clump that looks suspicious. It looks man-made, so he just decides let's deliver a salvo of fire to that. They pound it, and he immediately sees the guys waving and giving him thumbs up. He can tell that they hit whatever it was that they were shooting at. They move on. They ultimately see a tank commander, one of the few tanks that makes it up on the beach, where you get a few vehicles from B Company 741st Tank Battalion. They get all the way up to the beach, and with a scene that looks somewhat like this. That's one DD tank, or swimming tank, and then two tanks with what they call the deep water fording kit. The Frankfurt looks up and sees a tank commander who unbuttons and waves like this at them, and then points, and then he traverses the 75 millimeter main gun on the tank and starts firing at something where he's obviously trying to get the attention of the ship. The ship fires toward what he was firing at, neutralizes the target.
I remember asking Mac Evans down on the beach 3 years ago when the battle turned, and he said when those goddamn ships finally came in.
The ships finally broke. And that's the point. I had this very, very heated, argumentative exchange with a person that called me many years ago and he identified himself as being a volunteer Texas public school book fact checker. And he was very upset because he was reviewing a Texas school book for elementary or middle school, and that the textbook made the statement that the battle at Omaha Beach, which was almost a disaster, and he said, "Don't you find that offensive and historically inaccurate?" And I went, "No, I find that to be a very, very effective description of what was going on here prior to today." And we then proceeded to have a fantastic argument that I enjoyed greatly. But
does not mean that the operation was not successful.
Exactly, and it doesn't mean that the United States failed to plan this operation effectively, and it doesn't mean that there was a bumbling and fumbling massive bureaucracy that couldn't organize a major operation. what this represents is a milestone. This represents a major accomplishment in military organization and just human organization.
You can account for 1,000 variables, but not 10,000. I mean,
And precisely.
And I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, obviously the way you can overcome something like that is just sheer volume of numbers, which is why we have
Which is how we
X
overcame.
thousand number of troops and X hundred boats out there, and you know.
And when you consider that these little beach draws, D1
Right.
here, D3 down there, E1 and E3, those 4 beach draws where the heaviest concentrations of enemy firepower were to be found. Those account for most of our casualties. Those slow us down. And if you consider that there are moments before 10 a.m., I would refer to this battle as approaching disaster. And
Didn't they radio back not to come in anymore?
they suspend landings. They actually begin diverting all landings that are supposed to come in here at Dog Green, and they begin sending them over to Dog White. And it's because of the fact that things are not going well here.
And at what time in the morning did they call it off? And when did they start coming
They
back?
suspended landings at around 8:45, between 8:45 and 9 o'clock. But then, when you consider that what I'm describing here, Omaha Beach prior to 10 a.m., if you can characterize that as the worst case scenario, we still carried the battlefield.
We adjusted.
We were up on top of those bluffs.
Right.
We had men above the bluff shortly after 10 o'clock. We had basically driven the enemy off of the positions immediately on the beach before noon, and we were pushing into the interior. Yeah, it didn't go as we planned, but even in worst case scenario, even within a disaster scenario, we still overwhelmed the enemy with manpower and firepower and pushed them off the position, and we seized the beach. We forced the beach. So there's nothing to be ashamed of in the fact that we had a very difficult time on this beach.
And we think about the adjustments made from the naval standpoint. I mean, they put their ships at risk, not only for beaching them, but for mines. I assume that they weren't really worried about gunfire from here. I mean, these guns on the beach were facing parallel with the beach. They were not facing outward for the most part. Am I correct?
That's right. They weren't worried about like the
Right.
88 millimeter gun in that case. What they were worried about was Long Sur-Mer, which is down there with,
Right.
with 450 millimeter.
Right.
They were worried about Point Tahock over there. Although they didn't know Point Tahock had been moved,
Right.
they
were worried about
the
that.
concern that Point Tahock could just deliver anti-ship fire. And that's what these big batteries are, spaced every 15 miles. They're the anti-ship. They're the ship-killing batteries. They're worried about them. They're also worried about mines.
Yeah, got it.
And they're also worried about running aground.
But these ship captains made their own call.
Right.
It wasn't part of the plan.
Wasn't part of the plan, and you adapt to the mission, which is, the question remains, is that something that is unique to the American military culture, or are other military cultures just like that? Or in other words, are we special, or are we just common?
I would assume certainly in 1944, we had to be pretty unique in that respect.
We were, I think, and I think that these commanders
Certainly with
had
respect to our enemies.
flexibility that I think the enemy just didn't have. The enemy did not feel that they had it. You could point to exceptional cases in the German military of German war heroes that were public figures, that were Knight's Cross recipients, that, they had flexibility to be more daring.
They'd earned that.
And to bend the rules, but those are exceptions.
Because
And
most of it went back to Hitler, didn't it? Didn't they?
Very hierarchical command and control.
Right.
Extremely so.
And the German military, for all the way that it's been presented in the past as being completely inflexible, that's not really fair characterization, because they do have a certain level of flexibility, but I just think we have more of it. It is more of a culture of the American military.
And it seemed to me ours went all the way down to the individual paratrooper, for example, who lands in the wrong place and has to make the decision: do I get back to where I was supposed to be, or do I jump in the battle here and help out? And they've got to make those individual decisions. I mean, that seems to me that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, a level of flexibility that was probably pretty unique.
Right. Nowhere can you see that case more reinforced than on this beach right here, on Omaha Beach. Consider this. You have 9 infantry companies that are the first wave assault on Omaha. Out of those 9, 1 of them gets off the beach intact as a company. And that's all the way at the end, way down there at Fox Sector, L Company, 16th Infantry, pushing up on the far side of the draw, the E3 draw on the other side, E1 draw on the other side of the cemetery, E3 draw. So you get, out of 9 companies, 1 company that pushes into the interior, and that company, as it pushes into the interior, is not pushed into the interior because the company commander gets the company ashore intact and they move off. It's mainly because you have platoon leaders, and the most famous platoon leader from L Company 16th Infantry is Jimmy Monteith, recipient of the Medal of Honor, who was ultimately killed that afternoon.